Hey guys, welcome back for today's second lesson on immigration. Let me go ahead and pull up our vocabulary words. So our first vocabulary word is going to be center. And I'm not talking about like the center of a circle or the middle of something. This center is talking about a place where a particular activity or work is done. So right here, this is like a city center. Like it's kind of like in the middle, but it's still where you see people are gathering. There's stuff happening there. Then we have interpreter, and that is a person who turns speech from one language into another language. So if you're trying to talk to someone that does not speak the same language as you, you would have an interpreter that would kind of take what you're saying and turn it into that other person's language so they could understand what you were trying to say. We have liberty, which means freedom, and that's kind of what like the Statue of Liberty stands for. When people come to America and they see the Statue of Liberty, it stands for freedom. We have opportunity, which is a chance and a possibility. All right, guys, we are going to go ahead and get started on our story. So let's pull that up. So our story today is called A Little Giant Comes to America. Look, there she is. With cries of excitement, the ship's passengers rushed to the railing. It was the summer of 1889 when this ship of European immigrants made its way into New York Harbor. In the distance stood the sight they had dreamed of seeing, the Statue of Liberty, a symbol of freedom and hope, welcoming them into their new homes in the United States of America. There were many push and pull factors that led many people to come to America. Some wanted to own their own farms or businesses and knew that there was a greater chance of doing that in America than in their old countries. Others came from poor places where finding food or shelter had been a desperate daily struggle. They hoped that if they worked hard in this new place, they and their family could be sure of warm meals and a suitable place to take shelter and call home. Among the passengers was a man from Germany, who, although an adult, stood only 4 feet tall, whose body, instead of growing straight, seemed to bend to one side. His name was Charles, and he was a mathematician or an expert in mathematics and an engineer, a person who tried to design and build machines, bridges, or buildings. He had left his home in Germany for 2 reasons. First, he had trouble finding work in his homeland because he looked different. Many people did not understand that a powerful mind and a kind heart lay inside Charles's body. Second, Charles had written an article that said his nation's government was to blame for many problems. In many countries, writing such an article could land a person in trouble. One day, a friend warned Charles, "My brother, who works for the government, says that the police are going to arrest you and put you in jail." To avoid being sent to jail, Charles fled over the Alps, a large mountain range in Europe, to Switzerland. There, a friend of his named Oscar gave him a place to stay. Over dinner one night, Oscar said, "I am moving to America, Charles. Come with me. There you can find work and be free to write or say what you think." "If only I could," Charles sighed. "I cannot afford to buy a ticket." Oscar smiled. "My uncle moved to America and made a fortune. He is paying for my ticket. I wrote to him and he has offered to pay for yours as well." Now, less than 2 months later, Charles and Oscar, along with many other European immigrants, were sailing into New York Harbor on the east coast of the United States. Charles was too short to see over the heads of the other passengers, but Oscar cleared a path for him through the crowd. A minute later, the 2 friends stood at the railing staring up at the statue whose lamp lit the way towards a new homeland. Beyond the Statue of Liberty on its island is New York Harbor, was another island called Ellis Island. There were enormous buildings and docks on this island where ships could anchor and unload passengers. Charles thought that is Ellis Island. That is where the American government decides who gets to enter the country and who might be turned away. I know that only a few people are turned away. Those who are dangerous, sick, or do not have the paper saying they can move to a new country. Will they let me in after my trouble back home? Will they look at the way my body bends to one side and say I'm too small and weak to be welcome in America? Do you guys think Charles will be turned away? Hours later, Charles stood in a huge room in a building called the Immigration Center. Long lines of immigrants waited to approach a row of desks. This is where government clerks would ask questions to determine whether the travelers would be allowed to enter the United States. In another part of the building, doctors waited to examine the immigrants. Most people were allowed in, but Charles worried. What will I do if they turn me away? I cannot return home. If I do, I will be sent to jail. Finally, he reached the head of the line. A government clerk asked him a question, but Charles did not understand English. The clerk called over an interpreter who knew many languages, including German. Using the interpreter to turn his English words into German, the clerk asked, "What is your name?" Charles said his name to the clerk, and the clerk wrote it in a book. Then, without looking up, he said, "Do you have a job waiting here for you?" "No," Charles answered. "Do you have any money to live on until you find a job?" "No," Charles admitted. Now the clerk looked up at Charles and shook his head. "So you have no money and no job, and you can speak no English. I am sorry, but we want people who can add something to our nation." Just then, Charles' friend Oscar stepped forward. "If you turn this man away," he said, "you will be making the greatest mistake of your life. He is one of the greatest scientific and mathematical thinkers in the world. He may be only 4 feet tall, but he has many talents. You want citizens who can improve this country, and he can. I am so sure of that I will pay all of his expenses until he has a job." And that means, like, his friend Oscar, when it says pay for all of his expenses, that means Oscar's going to pay for all of his bills and his food and stuff like that, and a place for him to stay until he finds a job. 2 hours later, Oscar's uncle welcomed Oscar and Charles to his big house in New York City. Soon afterwards, Charles Steinmetz began to learn English and went to work at a large company using his powerful mind to invent useful new products. He helped improve the way electricity is carried through wires in order to bring electric power to buildings and houses. He helped to make electric street lights possible and worked with the famous American inventor Thomas Edison. Charles wrote books that helped other scientists understand electricity. He made more than 200 scientific discoveries. So guys, I want you to look at this image here. This is a photograph, and a photograph records images of things that people that were real. So it's like a picture, it's a photograph. So this is what he really looks like. He was not a fictional character like what it looks like here. He was actually a real person. Charles Steinmetz is his name. These discoveries made Charles Steinmetz famous and earned him a great deal of money, but he never forgot how other people had helped him. While continuing his scientific work, Charles began teaching at a college near New York City. He refused to take any pay for his teaching, saying, "Teaching others how to create useful inventions is the best way to repay the United States for taking me in." His friend Oscar understood. He explained in later years, like so many others, Steinmetz came to America so he could help others with his talents and also have a good job and life for himself. That is why they call the United States the land of opportunity. Like many other immigrants, the move to America gave Charles a new chance to achieve something. Oscar continued saying that I believe that every person brings something good to share. Putting all our talents together can make the United States and its citizens stronger and happier. But just think, that clerk at Ellis Island almost turned Charles Steinmetz away. Charles Steinmetz and his friend Oscar were two of the 23 million immigrants who came to the United States between the years of 1880 and 1920. So that was 1880, 1890, 1900, 1910, 1920. So out of 40 years, there were 23 million immigrants that came to the United States. The majority of these immigrants were from the European continent. Like Charles, these European immigrants sailed into New York Harbor and were registered into the United States at Ellis Island. Sometimes immigrants' names were recorded and changed or shortened to make them easier to say. And sometimes, as almost happened to Charles, immigrants were turned away if they were too sick or did not have the right papers. Can you imagine what life would be like today if Charles Steinmetz had to return back to Germany? So he helped the way that electricity came through wires, and then he helped Thomas Edison, who invented the light bulb. So can you imagine how different life would be today if we did not have Charles Steinmetz in America? And this is another photograph here of some more immigrants that came to Ellis Island. If you are ever in New York City and you do visit, you can go visit Ellis Island and the buildings there. And they actually do have books that have the immigrants' names written in them. So when Charles up here was with that clerk and that said that the clerk wrote his name in the book, that really did happen. You can go and you can actually look at those books. All right, guys, I hope you enjoyed this story today. I will talk to you guys tomorrow. Bye.